I want us to begin in the book of Numbers. We are this week in lesson 2, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That is a lot of material to cover in 2 classes. And I'll just tell you, as we used to say in high school, it ain't happening. But we're going to cover Numbers tonight. That's my goal. And I want to cover some things in addition to what we have in our handout. In fact, I made an extra handout. I don't think anyone has it, so I'm going to ask Doug. He's got it to pass that out. I also wanted to take some time and recommend some books. You know, oftentimes people say, hey, what are some good books that I could have for some studies? A couple of these books I've used today, but all of these books would be useful in the study that we're doing right now in Old Testament. First book that I'm going to suggest to you to buy is called Know Your Bible by Frank Dunn. Really, if you don't have this at your house, not now, but after class, you should just get online and order it and have it delivered. It's an outline introduction of every book of the Bible. It has lessons from the book, purpose of the book, key words, key verses, key thoughts, points of emphasis. The outline, the book outline, just a very general outline. Very good book. And it's every book of the Bible. The second one is similar but a bit more detailed. It's called Getting Acquainted with the Old Testament. There are 2 volumes. This is the first, and it deals with the books of Moses. Now, there's more in this than just the books of Moses. There's a lot of, critical type things like how do we know Moses wrote the books of Moses? Some detailed type things. Good reading. It's not so technical that I can't read it and understand it. So if I can read it and understand it, I know everyone here can. Charles Pledge is the writer of this. Also a very good book. A couple of other books. Oh, before I get to these, another resource that I highly recommend, and I don't know how many here take advantage of this. I take advantage of it. World Video Bible School has course notes for every book of the Bible. And I took advantage of Brother Chuck Horner's today with the book of Numbers. Outstanding material. Brother Horner didn't do every book. There's a variety of men who contributed, but he did a lot. Every time when I open a book, I'll go down and say, okay, who's the one that put this material together? And it's more than 50% of the time it seems like Chuck Horner. Very good material. So I highly recommend that if you don't have the course notes, and you can get them printed in a book, or you can get a digital copy. And the digital copy is what I have. You can take advantage of those. They will help you in your studies. 2 other types of books I recommend, not necessarily these, but types of books. And the other books I showed you were written by members of the church. These aren't. This one is Old Testament Survey. And it provides background information as much as anything. So background to the book, also some outlines. There's some critical type things with regards to who wrote it and how do we know, that kinds of thing. But it's just a summary of the Old Testament and books of the Old Testament as a whole. And then the fourth, and this is a book I really like, it's called Bible Manners and Customs. And it is strictly background info. Ur of the Chaldees. What was Ur of the Chaldees like when Abraham was there? What was culture? What were the religions? And it goes all the way through Bible times. It is an excellent, excellent book. I've got this, and also I have a digital copy of it, and consult it quite often. So I would recommend, and I use some of these books to prepare some of this supplemental material that we're going to look at tonight. With regard to the book of Numbers. And then if we get through all of this, then we'll pick up on our number 10 in our handout. Okay, does everyone have the handout, the supplemental handout? Is there anybody that did not get one? Okay, yeah. And we've got some extras So I think Char's going to need one. She shared hers. All right, so let's just look at some of this. The book of Numbers takes its name from, obviously, the numbering of the people. Okay, before we get going, everyone, you may have already done some reading on this handout. Don't look at the handout. Don't look at anything. Look at me. Tell me what you know. Tell me something or some things you know about the book of Numbers. Okay, it is a book of history. That's a true statement. What else? Tell me some people, places, events, any point of significance that you can think of that readily comes to mind about the book of Numbers. The rebellion of Korah. Numbers chapter 16. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram were the three key players in that. Okay, the spies, that would be chapters 13 and 14, where the 12 spies are sent into the land. Okay. What else?
Written by Moses.
Okay, written by Moses. All right, so the purpose of this little supplement is basically to provide a snapshot of the book of Numbers. So that whenever you pull this out, as you look at it, you say, yeah, exactly, that's in Numbers. Okay? All right, so the book of Numbers takes its name from the numbering of the people. There's a numbering at the beginning of the book. There's a numbering at the end of the book, the first numbering. And it's not a numbering, it's not a census of the whole population, but of the people that are 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war. So men of war. If you're aged out, then you're not counted. If you're too young, you're not counted. If you're a female, you're not counted. So only those men that were of the age and healthy to go to war. 603,550 was the number of the first numbering. And you can basically just triple that. And maybe more than that, because that's men of war. That's not counting the females in that same age range. That's not counting any children. That's not counting the older males and females also. So you're talking probably 1.5 to 3 million people is the estimation that came out of Egypt. Went in about 70-something people. The first numbering was at Mount Sinai, and they were numbered according to the tribes. The second numbering was at Moab toward the end of the book, chapter 26. And that is after the 40 years' time. There were a couple of years before the wilderness wandering started. Nevertheless, 40 years from the time they came out of Egypt to the time they actually crossed over into the Jordan River. And so you have a second numbering. All who had came out of Egypt, who were of adult age, perished in the wilderness, save for Joshua and Caleb. Okay? All right? So that's just a thought. Now, the Hebrew Bible, the name of this book in the Hebrew Bible carries the meaning in the wilderness, which is taken from, the opening statements of the book, which in the Hebrew Bible, all of the books are named in such a fashion. And that name also fits with this, in the wilderness, because that's what we have in the entire book. They're in the wilderness. Purpose of the book, and I thought this was a pretty good way. I kind of put it in my own words, but the principal thought came from Brother Pledge in his book. Without God, man is busy going, but never gets anywhere. Now, just a thought. Do you feel sometimes like you're just going and going and going, but not getting anywhere spiritually? You ever feel that way? Maybe you're trying to go without God. I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to become more of a spiritual. I'm trying to live a more holy life, but it seems like I'm always stumbling and falling. Well, take a step back and we need to take a step back and examine our lives. Are we trying to go without God? Are we going according to what I could grow if I do this. I could grow if I do that. Not going about it the right way. I thought that was a pretty good thought with regards as far as the purpose of a book. Some of the lessons from the book of Numbers. Every violation of God's law will receive justice. Every violation of God's law will receive justice. Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 2 especially emphasizes that. Acts chapter 7, 52 and 53, Stephen, in his words, also, in fact, I wanted to make a note of that one. Look at Acts chapter 7. And let's notice how Stephen words this. Acts chapter 7, verses 52 and 53. Well, actually, we need Hebrews also, because I went to Acts because of something that was stated in Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 2, and look at verse 2. For if the word spoken by angels, that's what drives me to Acts 7. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation? The contrast is between the old law and the law of Christ. The purpose of the book of Hebrews is encouraging those Hebrew Christians not to leave Christ and the gospel and go back to the law of Moses. And he shows the superiority of the gospel all the way through with admonitions. But as I was reading this, what I wanted to emphasize here is go back. We see that every violation of God's law here receives a just recompense or reward, receives justice. But what's it mean here when it opens up, for if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience receives justice? I thought God was the one that gave the law to Moses. Why does it say the word spoken by angels? Okay, so we go to Acts chapter 7, verses 52 and 53. And let's notice the words of Stephen. Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted, and they have slain them, which showed before the coming of the just one, of whom ye have been now the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the disposition of angels and have not kept it? Well, that helps us to understand it a bit. If we had time, we'd go to Galatians chapter 3. God gave the law to Moses through the mediation of angels. He received it at Mount Sinai. And so the point being made, with this law that God gave to man by the mediation of angels, how much greater than the law by the mediation of his Son? All of violation of God's law receives justice. Another lesson here, murmuring and complaining against God is rebellion. Let's go to Numbers chapter 14. And here are the spies, or the people's reaction to the spies. And what exactly did the spies do? Let's talk about that for just a moment. What did the spies, there were 12, 2 gave a good report, 10 gave an evil report. Those 10 that gave an evil report, what did they actually do? I mean, just in your own words. Okay, we can't take it. People are giants. The walls are built up. We're just grasshoppers in their eyes. We can't do this. Okay. Look at Exodus 14:27. Exodus 14:27. How long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. Well, murmuring, complaining. And then look at verse 36, I believe is where I want to go. And the men which Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur against him. Notice how this verse closes, by bringing up a slander against the land. Is that verse 36 of chapter 14 in Numbers? Numbers 14:36. I'll read it again. The men which Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur. How did they make the congregation to murmur? By this evil report. To murmur against the land by bringing up a slander upon the land. Does everyone have the word slander? Bad report? Okay. When we think of the term slander, I think this really expresses the sense here. When we think about slander, what is that?
Defaming somebody.
Okay. Defame. Do what? Lying. Gossip. Okay. And there's a sense of speaking against something. Defamatory, if I understand it, is something written down. Slanderous is something that is spoken. But the two are similar in principle. They're both speaking against. What word in the New Testament that's not often translated slander, in fact, may not ever be translated slander, but in its most basic sense, that's what it means, is slander. Blasphemy. That's what the term blasphemy means, is to slander. Now, what did they slander? Verse 36. The land. What was the land?
The promised land.
God's gift to them. Now think about that. They spoke about God's gift in a slanderous way, then caused the people to murmur and rebel against God. Murmuring and complaining against God is rebellion. God supplies, another lesson, God supplies all of man's needs. Food when they were hungry, Numbers chapter 11. Water when they were thirsty, Numbers chapter 20. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. And we could go on and on. Another lesson, God always fulfills his promises. He always fulfills his promises. Look at Numbers 14, we're there. Let's look at verses 6 through 9. Numbers 14, 6 through 9. And Joshua the son of Nun, Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. They spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land, and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord. How were they rebelling? By their murmuring and complaining against God. Neither fear ye the people of the land. Who should they fear? Who should they honor? Who should they trust? God. For they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. Now notice that. Their defense is departed. They are bread for us. Their defense is departed. What happened when the two went into Jericho? And this is going to be 40 years later. What were they told? The people were afraid of them because we heard what God did in Egypt, and we heard what God has done with the kings on the other side of the Jordan River. They don't have any defense against us. They are absolutely afraid of us. And that was even 40 years earlier. James?
Also, when you think about it, here's a people that wandered in an uninhabitable region for 40 years and prospered. Don't think that they didn't recognize that too. People don't live out there in that desert.
Right. And all of that was observed by the people in the land. All right, let's look at some key figures in the book. Some of the key figures in the book: Moses, who was leader and lawgiver, and he actually was a shadow image of the Christ, our leader, our lawgiver. Aaron, who was a high priest, also our high priest. We would also think of Joshua and Caleb, but how many of us would ever think of Miriam? Who in fact is Miriam? Moses' sister. Moses' sister. And I'll be honest, I'm looking at this list and I think, Miriam. Never really think of Miriam too much as a key figure in the history of Israel, period. Much less the book of Numbers. Well, I did some looking. She's mentioned in 7 verses in the book, which isn't very weighty necessarily, but she's mentioned in 7 verses. But what really caught my attention, 2 passages where she's found outside the book of Numbers. Look at Exodus chapter 5. Somebody read Exodus chapter 5. I'm going to go on to Micah and be ready to read that. Exodus chapter 5, verse 20. Anyone read that?
They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them as they came out from Pharaoh.
Okay. They met. That's Exodus 5:20. Okay. Well, I typed it up wrong.
6:20.
Okay. Read it.
Now Aaron took for himself my father's sister. Aaron, sorry, I saw sister.
Okay. There's one of these passages here in Exodus refers to her. 6:20.
6:20, Aaron took as his wife Jochebed, his father's sister, and she bore him Aaron and Moses.
Miriam is identified as a prophetess. She's identified as a prophetess, okay? And that's what I wanted you to have. Okay, so we see there's something with regards to her. I know somebody's going to find it because I see cell phone searching. But now I'm going to read Micah 6, verses 1 through 4. And this 15:20, there you go.
Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a thimble in her hand, and all the women went out after her with thimbles and with dancing.
That's right. It's when they crossed the Red Sea. Okay, and the song that they sang. So Exodus 15:20, she's identified as a prophetess. Now listen to Micah 6, 1 through 4. Hear ye now what the Lord saith. Arise, contend thou before the mountains, and let the hills hear thy voice. Hear ye, O mountains, the Lord's controversy, and ye strong foundations of the earth. For the Lord hath a controversy with his people, and he will plead with Israel. O my people, what have I done unto thee? And wherein have I wearied thee? Testify against me. Then he starts to talk about what he's done for them. For I have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt, redeemed thee out of the house of servants, and I sent before thee Moses and Aaron and Miriam. So I don't know what role she played. I brought you out of Egypt. I delivered you from being a servant, and I gave you Moses, and I gave you Aaron and Miriam.
She was a leader for the women
In chapter 15 of Exodus, certainly. So I don't know that everything, the role that she played is revealed for us completely, but she was a person of significance. Hayden?
What do you think the significance of her being identified as a sister of Aaron is?
I don't know if there's any significance necessarily, just identifying the two together there. So, all right, Joshua and Caleb, the two other key figures, both of those were the two spies who brought a good report, and Joshua also took the place of Moses when Moses died and brought the people across the Jordan into the land. So he became their leader at that point. Then some infamous figures in the book. Already noted Korah, Dathan, and Abiram in Jude, verse 11. Woe unto them, they've gone the way of Cain, ran greedily after the heir of Balaam for reward. That's the other infamous figure here, Balaam, who counseled the Midianites and taught them how to bring idolatry among the people so that God would be displeased with them, so that he would destroy them. Perished in the gainsaying of Korah. So Korah rebelled against God's appointed authority, Moses and Aaron. Who was Korah? He was a descendant of who? Korah was a Levite. So you had the sons of Aaron, then you had the Korah here was one of the Levites of Kohath, Merari, or Gershon. I'm not sure which one, but he was of the Levites. And Moses points that out in that chapter 16. All right, note how Numbers fits into the overall setting of Moses' writings, and I thought this was especially interesting. Genesis is man's fall in sin. All right, when man's in sin, what does he need? He needs a Savior. And how are we saved from sin? We're redeemed by blood. All right, so in Exodus we have man is redeemed. We see man redeemed by blood. In fact, God refers to, he said, I redeemed thee from Egypt. And he used the blood to do that. Then Leviticus, there's an emphasis on holiness and approaching God in worship. Well, man in sin cannot approach God in worship, but he must be redeemed with blood, and then he can approach God in holiness. But then what must man do once he is redeemed? He must remain faithful. And so Numbers, there's an emphasis on man's faithfulness. They murmured against God. They complained against God. They were unfaithful to God. Because of that, many perished in the wilderness. So there's an emphasis on faithfulness. And then Deuteronomy, which means second law, the idea is a restating of the law or causing to remembrance of the law. And there's the blessings and the cursings. Well, man is reminded of God's law. That's us today. Man in sin is redeemed by the blood of God, that he might approach God and worship him in holiness. He must remain faithful, and we are reminded by the law of God of all these things. I thought that was very interesting. And then Now, Brother Dunn, in his book, Know Your Bible, he noted the relation of Leviticus to Numbers. Now, he first noted the relationship of Genesis and Exodus, but we're not studying those. So Leviticus, we just finished Sunday, and Numbers. Now watch this. Leviticus emphasizes Israel's worship. Numbers emphasizes Israel's walk. They were in the wilderness. Leviticus stresses purity. Be ye holy, for I am holy. Numbers stresses pilgrimage. Leviticus highlights Israel's spiritual position. Numbers, their spiritual progress. Leviticus notes fellowship with God, while Numbers emphasizes faithfulness to God. And Leviticus speaks of priests and access to God, while Numbers, there's more of an emphasis on the Levites and service for man. Because the Levites, descendants of the tribe of Levi, so that's the priestly tribe, but you had to be a descendant of Aaron to be a priest and to serve in that function. But the sons of Kohath, Merari, and Gershon were also involved in things pertaining to the tabernacle and things pertaining to the temple. And so there was service. And so you see that emphasis in the book of Numbers. And then 3 examples of the mystery of God that's hidden in the shadows in the book of Numbers. The first one, the smitten rock and Christ. Numbers chapter 20, verse 7 through 11, we see the rock that was smitten. And that's referred to in 1 Corinthians 10:4. The brazen serpent and Christ, Numbers 21, 6 through 9. If you'll recall, because of their rebellion, God sent serpents among them. Many of them died. And how were they healed from that poison from those serpents? Well, a brass serpent was made, and they looked upon that and they were healed. John 3:14 references it back to that specifically and parallels that with Christ. And I always thought John 12:32 and 33, if I be lifted up, shall draw all men unto me, also kind of looks back to that. And then the cities of refuge and the church, Numbers 35. And we talked about that some Sunday, those cities of refuge. Hebrews 6 and verse 18 speaks of those who are seeking refuge today. All right, so just some things, some overviews, some parallels, some lessons, key thoughts, key points of emphasis in the book of Numbers. I thought it'd be good to have. You can hole punch those and put them in your folder or put them in the little pouch there, front or back. So let's go to our handout. If you've got your booklet, we're on page 2, at least it's page 2 of my printout. Number 10, 10 through 15. So let's see if we can get these. Numbers tells about what? This is number 14 of your cards. Numbers tells us about what? It's in the title. Okay. Counting of the people. Numbers tells us about the counting of the people. And again, there was a counting before the wilderness wandering and counting after. All right, number 11. Somebody read number 11 if you've got the blanks filled in.
Only the men 20 years and older were able to go to war and were not.
Okay, only those men 20 years old or 20 years or older who were able to go to war were numbered. First numbering, and we mentioned this earlier, how many were of the first numbering? 603,550. Okay, and then how many years later? About 40 years later. How many of that number were still living? Only 2, Joshua and Caleb. 603,448 people perished in the wilderness. 603,448 perished. How many were saved in the ark? How many were on the earth? It's estimated, possibly the same number that's on the earth today. Imagine if everyone on earth perished but 8 people. 600, somebody with a calculator, figure me the percent on 603,550 and only 2 living. only 2 making it into the land of promise. Do you see the point I'm making? Of all the souls that will live upon this earth, how many will be saved in the day of judgment? Have you got a percentage? Pretty low?
No, I was gonna say something, you know, a funny little thing, that nobody thinks about. And, about how many people have died, right? When we think about, our modern age and how many people have populated the earth and how many people have died. And that only half of the people that have ever lived have died. Because that's population growth, because of the continual population increase, it always outnumbers the people that have already died. So all the people, excluding the flood and things like that, but when you think of it generally, all the people that have died, it's only happened to half of us. So just an interesting point to think about.
Okay. 0.00000331. That's the percentage, which is not a percentage. That's not even a percent of a percent that made it through the wilderness. 2 out of 603,550. Here's a question. Is God serious about man's obedience? Yes. All right, number 14. And this is number 15 on your cards. And let me plead with you. If you're not taking the folder home and the handouts and looking over them and preparing them before class, please do that. Be better prepared, some better discussions. Some of the events in Numbers, all right? What do we have for Numbers chapter 1, verses 1 through 3 and 46? Okay, the numbering of the people there. Numbers chapter 13.
Spies.
Okay, those spies were sent out. 14. Okay, the wilderness wandering. And why was it? Why were they wandering in the wilderness? Okay, because they did not have faith in God. What did God say? I'll give you the land. What did they say? You can't do it. That's in essence what they said. You can't do it. And because of that, how many days were the spies gone? 40. And so 1 year for every day. And then Numbers 26, verses 1 and 2. What do we have? Numbering of the people. They're at the Jordan. And then number 15, the years between the numbering of the people. Okay, about 40 is what we have there. About 40 years. All right, we're not even going to start with into the book of Deuteronomy. We'll pick up here Sunday morning and do Deuteronomy and then jump into Hebrew history with Joshua.